Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. It's here, the 100th episode of Kowabana. When I first started this show way back in 2017, I never thought I'd get more than maybe 10 or 20 listeners. Now here we are, 100 episodes and thousands of regular listeners later, and I don't know what to say other than thank you. I'm glad you're all enjoying the show so much, and I'm happy to be able to share it all with you. I thought long and hard about what to do for the 100th episode. It's a special one after all, and in the Japanese game of Hyakumonogatari, once the 100th story is told, a spirit is supposed to appear. We've long gone past 100 stories, but either way, I wanted to do something special for this one, and then it hit me. A story I would otherwise never feature on the show. A Ni-channel classic that's considered one of the stories you have to have read if you're into Ni-channel's net lore. Why haven't I featured it on the show then yet? Well, it's long. Incredibly long. It will be the longest story ever featured on this show, and thus the longest episode as well. What better place to do it than the 100th episode? So grab yourself a drink, some snacks, prep the podcast for your background listening or whatever it is you do while you listen to the show, and get ready for one heck of a ride. Let's get right into it. This story was shared on Ni-channel back in 2010, and it's called Resort Job. This story took place during my third year of university. Summer vacation was approaching and 5 of us were planning a trip to the beach. Then someone suggested that we should get a part-time job while we were there, and I didn't have any other plans, so I said okay. 2 others had a training camp, however, so they would be unable to take on work. So amongst the 5 of us, 3 agreed to look for work, and the other 2 would come and stay in the Japanese inn that we were working in. Then the 3 of us split up to find a place to work for the holidays. We looked on the internet and found an abundance of places looking for part-time workers, and they welcomed groups as well. We picked one inn in particular that looked good. Of course, it was close to the beach and supposedly a good place to pick up chicks. This was the place. We applied over the phone and the conversation proceeded smoothly. Then the landlady asked if we could be there within 2 days. "I've got a lot of work for you to do." The answer was an easy yes. With the details decided, we were excited and for some reason went straight to the Kenko Land spas. Then we gathered at a friend's house after. With our fresh, clean faces straight out of the sauna, we discussed in fine detail how we planned to pick up some ladies. Then the day arrived. That day, the 3 of us, myself included, were to set out for the inn. It was my first time working in a resort, so I was both excited and nervous. When we got there, we saw a rather wide 2-story building spread out before us. It looked just like what you might expect of a grandparent's house. The sign said Maru Maru Inn, but in reality, it looked just like a private lodging for travellers. It probably should have said Maru Maru Manor. We called out from the entrance and a young woman came to greet us with a smile. I instantly got more excited. She informed us the Japanese inn had 4 guest rooms, a large dining room, and 2 rooms for the workers, for a total of 7 rooms. We were then guided into the dining room. A short while later, the woman returned with some tea. She said her name was Misaki, and she was raised nearby. She came back with the landlady, whose name was Makiko-san. She was physically fit with a big smile and extremely kind. If she had been just a little younger, I would have fallen in love at first sight. Along with her husband, there were 6 of us there and everyone was in high spirits. "The guest rooms are down the end of that hall," the landlady said when we were done with introductions. "Your room is down the end to the left. I'll explain more later, so please feel free to get settled in first." Suddenly, one of my friends asked a question. I'll call them A and B. "Are there any guest rooms on the second floor?" "No," the landlady answered with a smile. The second floor isn't in use right now." Isn't this still the peak season? I wondered, but didn't pay much more thought to it. I figured we'd find out more soon enough. We went to our rooms and put our stuff down, then took in the view from the window. It really was gorgeous. Work might get a little busy, but we were truly lucky to be able to spend even just some of our summer in such a place. I was excited for what adventures the rest of our holidays might hold. Then our life as part-timers began. The job was difficult, but everyone was so kind that it wasn't a struggle at all. A workplace really depends on those around you, doesn't it? "Man, we sure found a great job, didn't we?" A said after we'd been working there for a week. "We sure did, and it pays well too," B replied. "I know, right? But we're about to hit peak season soon, aren't we? It's gonna get busy," I said. "Oh yeah, they're bound to open upstairs when that happens, aren't they?" A asked. "I doubt it," B replied. "Doesn't the landlady live up there?" "Really?" A and I answered at the same time. "I don't know, but haven't you seen her taking food up there a lot lately?" he said. A and I both answered that we hadn't. B was in charge of cleaning the entranceway in the evening, so he often saw her going upstairs holding a tray with food on it before disappearing. We just shrugged our shoulders and didn't think much more of it. A few days later, I was cleaning the hall as usual when I saw something. The landlady was sneaking out of one of the guest rooms. I never saw her cleaning them. That was Misaki's job, so I found it highly suspicious. At first, I thought I might have been seeing things, but there was no doubt that it was her. I grew anxious over the course of the day, and finally, I couldn't keep it in any longer. I went to tell my friends. "I've seen her leaving them too," A said. "Seriously? Why didn't you say anything?" "I haven't," B interjected. "Then shut up." "Well, she must have had a reason. Besides, if we were to be suspicious of her, that would sour things, wouldn't it?" A said. "Yeah, I guess." At that point, we had 1 month left on our jobs. We discussed whether we should pretend like we hadn't seen it at all. "Maybe we should follow her," B suggested. "What do you mean?" A said. "Look how narrow this place is. We'd be seen instantly." "Maybe." "Why would you even suggest that?" I said. Even after some thought on the matter, we made no progress. Our other 2 friends would be arriving the next week, and we thought that if we didn't stir the pot, then we'd be able to enjoy our last few weeks there. But we were guys, and there were 3 of us. Our hearts wanted adventure, and we promised to let each other know if we saw anything strange. I slept soundly that night. The next night, B called us all over to our room. "You come here," I thought, but reluctantly I went over. I said I often saw the landlady go up to the second floor, right? Well, this time I waited and watched her with my own 2 eyes. I usually only see her go up the stairs, but yesterday I waited until she came back down as well. She came back about 5 minutes later. "And?" A asked. "She always eats dinner with us, right? So if she's taking food upstairs, that must mean that somebody lives up there." "Yeah, maybe," I agreed. "But we've never seen this person, and she's never said anything about them." "That is suspicious," A said. "But maybe they're just ill." "Yeah, I thought the same thing," B said. "But if she came back with the empty bowl 5 minutes later, then they must be pretty healthy." "That's how you decide?" "But don't you think it's strange? You told me to tell you if I saw anything suspicious, so I'm telling you." A and I were a little upset with his tone, but putting that aside, something did seem a little off. "I wonder what's up there." It was all we could think. The next day we finished work early, and A and I went to meet B by the entrance. Then we waited for the landlady. She appeared a short while later, holding a tray with a bowl of food on it. She opened the door leading to the second floor stairs, and then disappeared. I should mention that the stairs leading to the second floor were located outside the entrance. There was no way to see them from where we were standing inside. By leaving the front hall, and then following the wall and taking the first corner, there was a wall with a door. When you opened that, there were stairs. Sorry if it's a little hard to picture. Anyway, like B said, 5 minutes later, the landlady returned, the food bowl empty. Then she came back inside, taking care that nobody saw her. "I told you. Fast, right?" B said. "Yeah, she was." "I wonder what's up there," A said. "I don't know," B replied. "Want to go see?" "Honestly, I'm a little freaked out right now." "Me too." "Let's just go check it out," I said, and the three of us walked over to the door leading to the second floor. "Is it locked?" A asked, but when I turned the doorknob, it opened. B was standing to my left, in a position to see through the tiny gap that had just opened. "Ugh." He screwed his face up. "What is it?" A asked. "Don't you smell it?" B said. A and I couldn't smell anything, but B reacted strongly to it. "Are you messing with us?" A said. He got scared easily and was angry that B was apparently screwing with him. But B was being serious. "For real, man? You don't smell it? If you open the door a little further, you'll see." I steeled myself and opened the door a little more. Warm air wafted out as dust danced in the air. "It was the dust?" I said. "What the? The smell is gone." "Quit screwing around," A said, upset. "If something happens, I'm leaving you behind. I've decided." "I'm sorry," B said, "but I really did smell something. It was like kitchen waste or something." "Whatever. You're just imagining things." I noticed something while they were arguing. The hallway was extremely narrow. Only one person could fit through at a time. And there was nothing resembling a light. We could just barely see the stairs thanks to the light from outside. There was another door at the end. "If we go up there, it has to be one by one," I said. No. I'm not going up," A replied. "You're not?" B asked. "If you want to go up, then you go. I'm staying here." "No, I don't want to go either." "After all that, you're not going to go?" "Well, I am," I said. "For real?" A and B replied at once. Once something grabs my interest, I can't sleep until I know more. Then, if I can't sleep, I'll go out in the middle of the night to have a look, you know? And that's just asking for it. So, I'm gonna have a look now. I couldn't explain my curiosity, but I thought it would be better to check things out while A and B were there with me. But while I was curious, I was also scared. While I was going in by myself, if things suddenly went south, then the other two weren't allowed to run off and they had to tell me about it first. But if nobody was coming, then they were to stay quiet. If they didn't, then my life could be in danger, I told them. I gradually started walking up the stairs. Light shone in from the outside, dimly lighting the area. I carefully ascended, step by step, the floor creaking beneath me. I got scared and turned around, checking that the other two were still there. They hadn't noticed the noise. They were focused on me with their thumbs in the air, a sign that all was well. I faintly nodded and continued my ascent. I convinced myself that it was just the moans and groans of an old house. When I reached a spot the light from outside no longer hit, my curiosity and fear began to battle it out. I wanted to run. Looking through the darkness, it stirred up feelings that someone, or something, might be standing at the top of the stairs. Creak, creak. The stairs got noisier, and it felt like I was standing on something. Bugs? I got chills down my spine, but nothing appeared to be moving, and it was too dark for me to tell. I don't know how many times I turned around, but at some point, the two guys standing below started to look like dim shadows, perhaps because of the backlighting. But they kept their thumbs high in the air for me. Then, as I approached the end, a foul stench assaulted my nostrils. I reacted exactly the same as B had. Ugh. It stank. It was like kitchen waste mixed with sewerage. What the hell? I thought, and looked around. And then I saw it, in the corner of the stairs landing above me. Huge piles of food. That was the source of the smell, and flies that I'd somehow managed to miss were flying about everywhere. Then, half crazed, I discovered something else. The door at the top of the stairs was boarded over with countless planks of plywood that were then covered in countless Shinto talismans. On top of that was a webbing of thin rope, like that of a spider web. To be honest, it was the first time I'd ever seen a talisman in real life, so I didn't have the confidence to say that was what it actually was, but it seemed highly unlikely that it was a mass of regular stickers. There was no doubt about it. Something was being kept locked up in there. For the first time, I realized that I'd made a mistake. I've got to get out of here. As I went to turn around, I heard something from the other side of the door. It was like something being dragged, followed by the sound of something breathing roughly. I thought my heart was going to stop. Is someone there? Who? Who is it? I thought, as though I was a side actor in a horror film who was deviating from the norm. I should have just turned around and ran, but I couldn't. I didn't have the courage, nor the bravery to turn back. I couldn't do anything but stand there on the spot. My eyes looked around restlessly as I was drenched in sweat. The sounds on the other side of the door continued, and I desperately tried to move my frozen legs. Then the noise suddenly stopped for a moment, and everything fell silent. But it was just for a moment. Bang! The dragging noise started again. I couldn't believe it, but it sounded like it was coming from the ceiling above my head. Even though it was coming from the other side of the door just a moment ago, this time it was directly above me. My legs shook and I didn't know what to do. My insides screamed for someone to help me. Then, out the corner of my eye, just for a single moment, I saw something move. I was terrified and hesitated over whether I should look or not, but then I steeled myself and I saw that it was just A and B. They were screaming and waving from the bottom of the stairs. Their voices finally reached me. "Hey! Hurry up and get down here! Are you okay?" At that I came back to my senses and regained full use of my body. I ran down the stairs at full speed, and A and B later told me that I came running at them with my eyes closed, skipping stairs as I went. I just wanted to get somewhere safe, and apparently I ran right by them and back to our room. I don't remember much of that clearly now. Maybe I was so scared that the memories got buried. A and B followed me back to the room a short while later. "Hey, are you okay? What happened? What did you see?" I couldn't answer them. The sounds were echoing around my head and I was too scared to remember anything. "Hey, did you eat anything up there?" A asked with a serious look on his face. I didn't understand what he was asking and repeated the question back to him. When you reached the top, you crouched down, right? We were trying to figure out what you were doing, and it looked like you were eating something. Like you were stuffing your face. Yeah, and not only that. A and B both pointed at my chest. I was covered in dirt, and it stank of rotten food. I ran to the toilet at full speed and threw up. I didn't know what was happening. I had clear memories of reaching the top of the stairs, and the fear I felt there. I didn't crouch down even once, and why on earth would I eat that rotten food there? Yet, my shirt was covered in it, and there was evidence of it on my hands as well. Was I going insane? A and B came to check on me, worried. Can you tell us what happened? This isn't like you, A said. I felt like fear was going to get the better of me, but I thought it would be better not to hold it in, so I told them piece by piece exactly what happened when I reached the top of the stairs. They nodded their heads and listened seriously to me. What I told them was entirely different to what they saw, but they listened until the end. That alone made me feel so much better that I thought I might cry. Then I noticed my legs were stinging. What the hell? I thought, and when I looked down, I saw my knees and the back of my legs were covered in tiny scratches. I looked closer and saw I was covered in tiny pieces of plastic. Red pieces and some blackish white pieces. I took a long, hard look at them. What's that? B said, picking a piece off and looking at it. Then he screamed and dropped it to the floor. Seeing that, A jumped back as well. What the hell? Look closer at it, B said. What is it? Hurry up, you're freaking me out here, A yelled. It looks like nails. The three of us froze. I was overcome with fear, but also a strange sense of ease as I remembered that voice from earlier. Ah, that sound was the sound of nails dragging. I didn't know why I thought that, but thinking back, it had to be related. The creaks as I climbed the stairs and the feeling of stepping on something had to be the nails, right? And they belonged to whatever was scratching on the other side of the door. So I must have cut myself when I was on my knees eating the scraps and when I wildly ran back down to escape. But that didn't matter anymore. All I knew was that we couldn't be there any longer. I can't keep working here. Not anymore, I said. I understand. Yeah, I feel the same, B agreed. We'll tell the landlady tomorrow, I told them. We're gonna tell her? We have to. She's been kind to us this whole time. We need to apologize at the very least. But isn't she the most suspicious? B asked. I don't want to see her face when we tell her. Idiot! We're not going to tell her why. We're just going to tell her that we quit, I said. Yeah, A agreed. That would be for the best. That night we packed up our things. Things weren't in that much of a mess, considering we were guys, but we were so scared that the three of us put 2 futons together and huddled like dried sardines until we fell asleep. That night, not a single one of us made any noise. We just waited for morning to come. We greeted the next morning in silence, and then suddenly my phone alarm went off. It was our usual wake-up time. B jumped, frightened. He was a good guy at heart, and the night before said to me, I'm sorry. You went through a far more terrifying experience than I did, and yet I keep acting like this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't go up to help you. I thought I might shed a tear, he was so kind. But thinking about it more, what did he mean by, I experienced something more terrifying? I was the one who had the scary experience. All A and B did was watch from the bottom of the stairs. Did he mean that? Me running down the stairs with reckless abandon at them? Thinking about it normally, did he mean that my story was scary? I thought perhaps I was being too sensitive, thanks to everything that had happened. I just wanted to get back home as soon as possible and enjoy the rest of my summer vacation with everyone. But after that, B was seeing monsters in every shadow. He jumped at every little sound and looked at the cuts on my legs like they were going to swallow him whole. Something wasn't right. A was a little more worried than usual, seeing him like that, and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Hey, are you alright? Have you gone nuts because you didn't get any sleep?" "Shut up!" B screamed suddenly and threw A's arms off him. A and I fell silent. "Hey, what's wrong?" I asked. A was so surprised he couldn't speak. "Am I okay?" B said. "Why the hell would I be okay? I thought we were gonna die. Quit acting like you're worried about me when you don't even have any idea about what's going on," he screamed in A's direction. What was he talking about? He thought he was going to die? What did he mean by that? That had nothing to do with the fear he felt from my story. A and B were particularly good friends, and whenever A was messing around with him, no matter what it was, B never got angry. I'd never once seen him raise his voice towards A, and of course, A had never experienced it either. It was the first time I'd seen him look so flustered. I decided to ask B about it. "What do you mean? You thought you were gonna die? You were at the bottom of the stairs the whole time, right?" I was watching you the whole time." He paused for a moment and looked down at the ground. "Even now, I'm watching you." Even now? Watching what? I couldn't understand what he was saying. He must have gone mad. Something had possessed him. Despite that, B spoke confidently, although his tone wavered. "I was down the bottom that whole time, but I was watching." "You were watching me?" "No, well, at first I was, but as you were going up, I saw something." "Okay." Honestly, at the time I didn't want to hear what he had to say next, but B looked like he couldn't keep it to himself any longer. It was like looking at a picture of myself from the day before. Thinking back on how much better I felt after A and B listened to my story, I knew I had to do the same for him. "What did you see?" B was quiet for a moment, like he was thinking about what to say next. "I think it was a shadow." "A shadow?" "Yeah. I thought it was your shadow at first. But when you crouched down and started eating that food, the shadow continued moving. I saw your shadow get smaller as you crouched, and our own shadows were at our feet. But that wasn't the only shadow moving about. There were 3, no, maybe 4 others." I broke out in goosebumps all over. I wanted him to be joking, but the guy standing in front of me wasn't telling a joke. On the contrary, he was so serious that if I even suggested he might be joking, he would probably get pissed off. "I was the only one there," I said. "I know that. And there's no way that 4 or 5 people would have been able to fit in that space in the first place. The stairs were only wide enough to fit a single person. They weren't people. Even you gotta understand that much. No matter how you look at it, there's no way they could have been people." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They were stuck to the walls." "Huh?" "They were stuck to the walls and roof, like spiders, and they were squirming and... B's breathing started to labour as he recalled what he saw. "Calm down. Take a deep breath, okay? It's all right. We're all here," I said. After B calmed down, he continued. "They weren't people. They weren't even people to begin with. They didn't look like people either. No, I mean, they were shaped like people, but they weren't." I didn't know what he was trying to say. "Something that was shaped like a human was stuck to the wall?" I asked. B nodded silently. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it might fly out of my mouth. Right away I thought that what he saw wasn't a shadow. There was no way a shadow could move around side to side and on the roof. Even if they had been shadows, there had to be something else there to create them. Even I know how stupid I was. I mean, I didn't notice anything moving around me, and I was apparently on the ground shoving rotten food into my face, right? That sound, that scratching and scraping, wasn't on the other side of the door. It was actually on my side, right next to me. That breathing as well. I was so scared that my head started spinning. "I'm sorry about before. That was my bad." B turned to apologize to A, ignoring me. "No, it's okay. I'm sorry too," A replied. There was an uneasy tension in the air after that, but I did my best to remain calm. I focused on breathing in, then breathing out, over and over. Then A spoke up. "Hey, you said before that you were still watching him." "Ah, sorry. I was a little confused." "My bad. It's okay now," B answered before A could finish speaking. He smiled, but it was clearly a fake smile. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Kinda unrelated, but for some reason, the one thing that really remains in my memory from that time was the twitching under B's eyes. It only happens to a certain number of people, right? But when you force a smile, the area under your eyes often starts to twitch. Anyway, getting back to the story, we didn't ask any more than that. You might call us cowards, but we were too scared to ask. Think about it. After telling us all of that, there was still something B was hiding. There was no way. My heart might rip in two if I had to hear it. Then I'd be the one going mad. A short while later, we heard the sounds of Misaki getting breakfast ready in the dining room. We had apparently been talking for quite some time. Honestly, I had no desire to eat, but I didn't want them to think anything fishy was going on, so we had no choice but to go. I slowly stood up and turned to the others. "We should make it quick. We'll tell her once we've finished breakfast." "Good idea," A agreed. "I'm not hungry," B said. "A, you brought a laptop, right? Can I borrow it for a bit?" "Sure, but eat something first." "There's just something I want to look up. We don't have much time, so you two go ahead." "All right," I said. "I'll get Misaki to make you some rice balls." Having said that, we left for the dining room. Thinking about it later, was it even okay for us to eat breakfast there on the day that we were planning to quit? If someone else had done that to me, I'd be pretty upset. But we ate breakfast like it was normal. When we got to the dining room, the landlady looked at us, then looked at my legs, and smiled. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" They were the first words she'd spoken to us since we got there, and considering the events of the day before, they felt extremely ominous. I was so scared I stood ramrod straight. A slapped me on the backside and answered instead. "Yes, sorry we're late." My body finally released its grip on me, and I could move again. Honestly, I never expected scaredy cat A to be the one to save me, so I was shocked. We informed them that B wasn't feeling too well and was resting in bed, and asked if Misaki could make some rice balls for him instead. Sure, that's fine. But B really should rest today then, Misaki said with concern. A and I sat in silence. We couldn't tell her he'd be fine because we were quitting anyway. The landlady looked at me the whole time we were eating, smiling. Her chopsticks weren't moving. It was like she was waiting to jump me. Misaki and her husband also noticed, their eyes flickering between me and the landlady. A was frozen solid the whole time. I finished breakfast as soon as possible, wanting nothing more than to be as far away from there as I could, and went to grab B from our room so we could tell them that we were quitting. I heard B's voice on the way back. He was on the phone with someone. I didn't want to interrupt him, so A and I entered, sat down on the floor and waited for him to finish. Yes, today if possible. Yes, thank you. Yes, we'll come. Thank you very much, B said, and then hung up. It appeared he had plans to go somewhere as soon as we got back. I didn't want to pry, so I didn't say anything. We grabbed B and took him back to the dining room. Misaki was cleaning up when we got there. The landlady was gone. Then I suddenly thought, she was there, wasn't she? I flashed back to watching her disappear to the second floor with food on her tray. The food she took must have been the leftovers, which she added to the pile each time. Day after day, the mountain grew larger and larger. What is it for, though? I wondered, but quickly changed my mind. There was no time for that. We were quitting today. Time to say goodbye and quickly forget about it. I had to forget about it, I told myself. A asked Misaki where the landlady was. She's probably watering the flowers. She'll be back in a minute. Then she looked at B. B-kun, I'll make you some rice balls right now, so hang on a moment. She smiled and returned to the kitchen. Ah, Misaki. If none of this had happened, Misaki and I surely would have had some adventures that summer. We waited for the landlady to return. She came back a short while later and looked at us blankly when she saw that we were sitting in the dining room and not working. What's wrong? I prepared myself and cut straight to the point. Ma'am, do you have a moment? We have something we'd like to talk to you about. And what's that? You look so serious, she said and sat down in front of us. Please understand what we have to say. We'd like to quit work today. A and B quickly lowered their heads. Please. The landlady was silent for a moment, her expression unchanging. I found that awfully strange. Not even her eyebrows moved, like she was expecting us to say that. Is that so? She said after a moment's silence. Okay. Guess there's not much I can do with you kids, huh? She said and smiled. Then she spoke to us about our wages and the cleaning of our room before we left, and she told us she would let us know when everything was ready. The conversation went so well it was almost an anticlimax, but the three of us were relieved. But somewhere, deep in my heart, I felt like something was wrong. With that taken care of, we got to work right away. Our bags were already packed. All we had to do was clean the room, and that was it. Ever since we started the part-time job, whenever work finished for the day, we always ran right over to the nearby beach. And then, after working hard all day, we'd sleep like babies. So we didn't spend much time in the room. Even though 3 guys had been using it, it wasn't that messy to begin with. It took us less than an hour to clean it all, and it was spotless by the time we were done. We went back to the dining room and got ready to tell the landlady that we were done. The landlady, her husband, and a sad-looking Misaki were sitting there. The 3 of us got down on our knees and bowed. We haven't been here very long, but thank you for everything you've done for us. We're sorry it has to end so soon, I said. Thank you very much, the 3 of us then said in unison and bowed our heads deeply. The landlady stood up and walked over to us. "Not at all. Thank you." It really was brief, wasn't it? "It's not much, but here." She handed us 3 brown envelopes and then 3 small pouches. The envelope was heavier than I thought, while the pouch was light. "Take care," Misaki said from behind her. She looked like she was about to cry. "Here, I made enough for everyone," she said, and handed us some rice balls. "Oh, come on, quit it. I'm gonna cry," I thought, and I couldn't look her in the eyes. You're probably thinking how I could be so sentimental after nearly dying the day before, right? But in reality, we were parting from people who had been terribly kind to us, so how else could I feel, really? After we were done, it was time to leave. We arrived at the inn by bus the first time around, but we returned via taxi. The husband said he would drive us to the station, but B refused. Everyone saw us off once the taxi arrived. It probably looked like an emotional parting to someone watching from the outside, but in reality, we were running away. I turned around before I got in the taxi. I could just barely see the door leading to the second floor stairs. I squinted, and it kind of looked like the door was open, just a little. I turned away. The 3 of us got in the car, told the driver where we were going, and set off. Once we were away from the inn, B suddenly told the driver to change directions. He handed him a note and asked to take us there instead. The driver looked suspiciously at the piece of paper. "Are you sure? It'll be costly." "I'm sure," B said. He turned to A and I, staring blankly at him. "There's somewhere we need to go first. All of us." I looked at A. We were thinking the same thing. Where are we going? A short while later, the driver spoke to us again. "Is that car behind us by any chance one of your acquaintances?" "Huh?" I thought, and turned around. A small truck was closely following the taxi, the driver waving at us. It was the husband. We thought that perhaps we had left something behind, so we asked the taxi driver to pull over. The husband followed suit and parked behind us on the side of the road. "You can't leave like this," he said as he approached us. "We're not. There's no way we can go home like this," B replied. They were having a conversation of their own, and neither A nor I could follow it. What are you talking about?" I said. I had no idea, so I asked them straight. The husband turned to look me straight in the eyes. "You went there, didn't you?" My heart thumped loudly in my chest. How did he know? I was petrified. Not because of something supernatural, but it was like I'd done something terrible. "Yes," I said with all the spirit I could muster. The husband sighed. "If you go straight home, you'll take that thing with you. Why on earth did you go up there?" "Well, I suppose it's my fault for not saying anything in the first place." "Take what back with me?" Come on. Once I got home, the rest of my summer vacation was waiting for me, right? Worried, I looked at A. He was looking at me, a surprised look on his face. Even more worried, I turned to look at B. "It's okay. We're going to be purified now. I've already spoken to the temple about it," he said. I couldn't believe it. I was possessed? What the hell? Was I going to die? That's always what happens with these things, right? Why did I go up there? If you didn't want us going up there, then you should have said so in the first place. I was so scared that I wanted to blame someone, anyone else. The husband glanced at my dumbfounded expression and continued talking. "Purification?" "Yes," B said. "You can see it." Silence. "Hey, what do you mean by that?" A said. Sorry, B replied. Please don't ask me about it right now. Without thinking, I grabbed him. Hey, quit screwing around. What the hell is going on? Hey, quit it. The husband forced himself into the conversation again. You should be thankful to him, not angry. But why can't he tell us about it? Because you can't see it yet. B is the one in the most danger right now. A and I turned to look at him. He looked troubled. Why him? I was the one who went up there. I know, the husband replied. But you can't see it, can you? I don't even know what the hell this thing is that I'm supposed to be seeing or not. What is it? I don't know, he replied. What? His contradictions were starting to piss me off. I just know that it's black. That's it. But... He turned to look at B. I don't think going to be purified will do much good. B looked at him suspiciously. Why? Something like this happened once before. I can't say much about it though. We won't know unless we go. Yeah, that's true. So, what are you going to do if that doesn't work? Silence again. It sure has been quick though, since you saw it. I had no idea what he meant by that. Quick? What was quick? But as soon as he said it, B broke down in tears. He sobbed silently. A and I were frozen beside him. There was nothing we could do. Perhaps sensing the strange atmosphere outside, the taxi driver opened his window. Is everything okay? None of us could answer. B was lying on the side of the road, huddled and crying. I'm terribly sorry, the husband said to the driver. I know they called you out here, but I don't suppose I could get you to drop the boys off here. Huh? But... The driver looked at us instead. The husband ignored him and went back to B. Do you know why I came after you? There's someone who knows how this all started. I'm going to take you there. I've already told them. We need to go quickly. There's no time. You have to believe me. His shoulders heaved as he cried. B did his best to look up and answer. Please. He couldn't even breathe. They weren't the tears of a man. It was like a baby bawling its eyes out. After what happened the day before, B had been holding everything in by himself. That was the only time I ever saw B cry like that. Not before and never again after. Hearing his answer, I turned to the taxi driver. I'm sorry. We'll be getting out here. How much for the ride? After that, we got in the husband's truck. Well, A and I got in the tray on the back. It was the most fun I've ever had riding in a vehicle. Regardless of the fact that we were back there, the husband drove like crazy. A screamed like a little girl, but I didn't tease him about it. I don't know how long he drove for, but it probably wasn't that long. It wasn't long enough for my tailbone to start hurting, in any case. We arrived at a normal house. There was a small shrine gate beside it, with stone stairs leading into the distance. We were led to the house, and the husband rang the doorbell. While we waited, he told us to only answer the questions we were asked. You boys have sharp tongues. Don't say anything stupid. He could talk. A few moments later, a young woman came out. She was a regular woman in her 20s, but I remember there being a huge mole in the middle of her forehead. We were led inside to a tatami room in the corner of the house. Inside was a monk, a middle-aged man, and an old guy. I heard the middle-aged man mutter, "How unlucky," as we entered. Sit, the husband said. We sat down in front of the three men, and the husband sat beside us. Is this all of them? The old man asked. Yes, that's correct. This young man, B, can unfortunately already see it." The old guy and the middle-aged man looked at each other. "Was he the one who went to the hall?" the monk asked. "No, this young man was." The husband pointed to me. B apparently saw the thing from below." "Is that so?" the monk said. He was silent for a moment before he turned to B. "Young man, is this the first time you've ever experienced something like this?" "Something like this?" B repeated. "Yes, seeing a spirit like this." "Ah, I've never seen one before." "Is that so? How strange. Am I—" B tried to say something. Everyone turned to look at him. "Yes," the monk said. "Am I going to die?" Though his arms were rigid on his knees, he was shaking. "Yes, well, if things continue like this, then—" the monk answered quietly. B was at a loss for words. He suddenly stopped shaking and stared at a spot on the floor. "What do you mean, die?" A interjected. "Possession," the monk said. His explanation made no sense. "Who would possess what?" the monk continued. "Of course you don't understand what I'm saying. Young man, didn't you feel something strange when you went up to the hall?" The hall he was speaking of must have been the second floor of that inn. "I heard a noise," I answered, "and strange breathing. There were lots of talismans on the door as well." "Really? You probably noticed, but there are inhuman things in that place." I wasn't surprised. That was what I suspected. "It is likely that you sense the presence of those inhuman things with your ears. In general, humans do not notice them. They are quiet, unnoticed by man." The monk slowly stood up. "Bikun, can you see it right now?" "No," he said, "but I've been hearing something since earlier, like something scratching at the walls." "Because it can't get in here. There are several barriers barring its entrance. It's desperately trying to break them. But you can't stay in here forever. Once you leave here, I want you to go to the Ondo." I don't know what that was, but that's what it sounded like he said. "Bikun, once you leave this room, those things will appear again. You will struggle once more, but you can be saved. Be strong." B nodded his head furiously. Then the monk took us around to the side of the house to the shrine gate, and we climbed the stairs. The husband joined us until we got outside, but then he spoke to the old guys about something, bowed his head, and left. With the only person we knew now gone, we suddenly felt hopeless. We huddled close together as we walked up the stairs. B especially was hunched over, looking side to side and clearly tired. We tried to keep him between us, so we could protect him from the side as we walked. We saw a large temple when we reached the top of the stairs, but the monk didn't take us there. Instead, he took us to the right and past it. There was another shrine gate, and even more stairs. "Bikun, how do you feel now?" the monk asked before we passed under the gate. "It's standing on two legs. It's been following us this whole time. Watching us," he said. "Is that so? So it's already standing, huh? Seems it's happy you found it, but we don't have any more time. We must hurry." There was a small building at the top of the next flight of stairs that you couldn't even begin to compare to the temple down below. The monk went around the back and then called out to us. We followed him, and he said we would have to spend the night there, and he would purify us of the thing that had attached itself to us. There was no light inside, and we were not to say a single word until dawn. Of course, you cannot take in your phones either. Anything that gives off light. You may not eat or sleep either. And if we needed to use the toilet, he handed us a strange cloth bag. I couldn't believe my eyes. Cloth? But according to the monk, liquid would not leak from the bag. It was hard to believe, but there was no point in arguing over it, so I shut up. Then he made us drink from a bamboo pipe and took a mouthful himself before spraying the water on us. Then he told us to go inside. We went to enter, one by one, but as soon as B stepped inside, he put his hand over his mouth and exited, vomiting everywhere. We watched him in shock while the priest rushed over. "You boys, didn't you go to the hall today?" "Huh? No, yesterday," I replied. Strange. It should only be temporary and you should be able to be purified, but he can't enter the Ondo. I had no idea what he was saying. Then the monk looked at the bag by B's waist. "Did you receive anything while you were staying here?" Nothing came to mind, but then A spoke up. "We received our pay today." It was so obvious that I'd forgotten about it. Come to think of it, technically our wages were something that we received. "Ah, this pouch too," I said. "And rice bowls, if we're talking about everything we got." I remembered the wages and pouch we received from the landlady and the rice balls from Misaki. Hearing that, the monk spoke to B again. "B-kun, do you have any of those things on you right now?" The rice balls are in the large bag, but I have my wages and the pouch now," B said, and took them out of his bag. The priest opened the pouch. He opened it wide so we could see inside. My breath caught in my throat. It was full of nail clippings, the same as what was on my legs. They were just like I remembered, red and blackened. B threw up again. Then I threw up. The area stank and the monk screwed his face up. He took everything B had on him, and he told us to do the same. I gave him my phone and wallet and asked him if he could deal with the pouch in my travel bag. The monk nodded, made B drink from the bamboo again, and sprayed him with water. The three of us went inside the Ondo. "You mustn't open this door," the monk said once we were inside. "I'll be in the main building. Nobody will come near here until tomorrow morning. You mustn't talk to anything on the other side of these walls. You must not speak inside the Ondo either. You must not let anything know where you are. You must follow these rules, okay?" He looked over us all. We could do nothing but nod. It felt like we were already not allowed to say anything. And besides, I was too scared to talk. The monk checked everything once more, and then closed the door. He left us in silence. The inside of the Ondo was pleasantly cool. I was a little unsure whether we could stay in there without eating or drinking, but after actually going inside, I felt more confident. The building itself was rather old, and there were gaps in the walls. Plus, it was pretty small. It was only lunchtime, so light filtered in through the cracks, and I could clearly see both A and B. It was the first time that we were together in a situation where we couldn't speak to each other. I nodded my head as if to say everything would be okay, and they returned the favor. A short time later, we stopped looking at each other and focused on different directions. We wanted to speak, but couldn't, and with no way to tell how much time had passed, we could do nothing but stare into space as we waited. It felt like it had been forever and a day, yet it was still light outside. Then I heard what sounded like A rummaging through something. I went to stop him before he made too much noise and turned in his direction when he showed me a piece of paper. He had a pen in his other hand. He disobeyed the monk and secretly brought them in. The paper was the wrapper from some chewing gum. It wasn't like we were carrying around a notepad, so that was probably all he could think to use. What the hell is he doing? I thought. But considering the hopeless situation we were in, a situation where we couldn't communicate with each other in any meaningful way, I couldn't blame him. On the contrary, it was our one shining light, and while I can't explain it very well, it gave me a sense of relief at the same time. A wrote something on the paper and then handed it to me. "Is everyone okay?" I took the pen from him and, in tiny letters, I wrote in some open space. "I'm okay. B?" Then I handed the paper and pen to B. "I'm okay. I can't see or hear anything." He gave the paper back to A, and just like that, we started communicating through writing. "I have 4 pieces of gum left, including the silver lining. That makes 8 pages. Write in tiny letters," A wrote. "Okay," I wrote. "We won't be able to do this tonight, so let's talk now." "Okay," B wrote. "What time is it?" "Dunno." "About 5? We've been here around an hour." "Then it would be 4. What if it's only 3? We've been here forever." Just like that, we finished 1 sheet of paper. "You're writing too big," A wrote. I bowed my head in apology. A handed me the pen. "I'm hungry." I handed it to B, but he passed it to A without writing anything. "Me too," A wrote and passed it back to me. Even though we were in such a helpless situation, that was what we spoke about when we were finally able to. But there was something I had to tell them before I was unable to. "Whatever happens, let's do our best until the end." "Yeah." B. "What'll happen if I scream?" A. "Put something in your mouth." "There's nothing here." "Should I take my clothes off?" "Nothing's gonna happen. Believe it." B had nothing to say to that. I didn't know what I was trying to say either. The monk never said nothing would happen. In fact, he'd actually warned us that things we might not expect were going to happen. I prayed for time to move faster, but at the same time, I was terrified of nightfall. It wasn't just me. Then, and now, we were all terrified. The one saving grace was that we could all see each other. I wanted to dispel the awful atmosphere, so I took the pen and paper from B and started writing. "We're wasting the time we can chat." I handed it to A. Sometimes it's good to leave things up to others. A looked at the paper, confused, before he wrote something and handed it back. "Okay, what are you gonna do when we get back?" "Good question. First, I'm gonna go to the video store." "Why?" "I forgot to return a DVD." "How long have you had it?" It was a lie. I just wanted to take my mind off things, so I wrote the first thing I thought of. But the atmosphere lightened, and both A and B wrote about what they were going to do when we got home. Bit by bit, we fell into a comfortable silence. Then, when the paper was about to run out, B wrote something. "I'll do exactly as the monk asked. I don't want to die." A and I looked at his final words. "I don't want to die." I'd never once had to say those words seriously. No doubt A felt the same. I'd never once thought about dying. I'd never once felt close to dying. But now there was someone right in front of my very eyes that felt that way, from the bottom of his heart. The reality of the situation hit me like a sledgehammer. I looked B straight in the eyes and nodded. After that we didn't say much, but strangely, I didn't feel alone. We could sense each other nearby and feel the sun setting outside. The cicadas grew lively, but it didn't feel like we would get used to the sound. There was something off about the situation. I listened closer and could hear something else amongst the insects. It slowly got louder and clearer. I was convinced earlier than I thought. It was that breathing. I looked at B. It was hard to see him in the dim light, but he didn't show any signs of hearing it. Maybe he couldn't. Come to think of it, B never said anything about the breathing. Maybe he never heard it at all. Or maybe he just hadn't noticed it yet. I tried to think of what to do. B noticed me stiffen and started to look around the room restlessly. Then he stopped and focused on a single point. He was looking right over my shoulder. His eyes widened. A noticed as well and turned to look in the same direction, but apparently he couldn't see anything. I was so scared that I couldn't turn around, but I could still hear the breathing by my ear. It was right there. Not moving, just breathing. Phew. Phew. I couldn't move. Then it sounded like something was being dragged around the ondo. It appeared A could hear that because he quickly grabbed my arm. The sound was circling us, and gradually the breathing changed into something strange and unfamiliar. I could only hear the sounds, but I knew that it was slowly prowling around the ondo. It was like I could hear the sound of A's heartbeat coming through his arm. I couldn't check on B, but he was no doubt frozen to the spot. None of us did so much as tremble. I covered my ears and closed my eyes in an effort to run away from the fear. "Just go away!" I screamed from the bottom of my heart. I don't know how long passed. It could have just been a few minutes, but it might have been longer as well. When I opened my eyes and looked around, the ondo was completely black and I could barely see anything. Not only that, the earlier sound had stopped. Unable to judge if the thing was still there or had moved on, I couldn't move. But there was something even more dreadful waiting in the darkness for me. I squinted, but couldn't see anything. I couldn't even call out to ask if the others were there or if they were okay. But A was still gripping my arm, so I knew that he was beside me. I became exceedingly worried for B though. He had definitely seen something. I searched desperately for him in the darkness, but I couldn't see him. I grabbed A's arm with my left hand and slowly started walking. I did my best not to make any noise, and not to scare A either. It was too dark to convey our feelings to each other. If someone panicked, it would all be over. I didn't know where we were, so holding A's arm with my left, I put my right hand out and waved it around in front of me as I proceeded. Then my finger hit something, and my heart jumped. Judging by the feeling, I'd hit the wall. Odd. I'd walked in B's direction, but he wasn't there. I panicked. I turned back from the wall and started walking again. I hit another wall. I'd run out of places to go. I wanted to cry. Where is B? It was all I could think. I didn't know what to do, so I stood there, frozen, tightly gripping A's arm. Then A started walking, this time pulling me along. He followed the wall, and when we hit the corner, he turned, and we followed it again. We kept walking until A came to a sudden stop. He pulled me forward, and I felt something warm. It was a person, trembling. "We found B!" But as soon as I had the thought, I started to doubt it. Then I started to think that maybe A was the same. He was beside me the whole time, but was it really A? Thanks to the darkness, I was starting to suspect everything. A grabbed my arm in the silence and started walking again. I followed him slowly. Then, just for a second, I saw some light out the corner of my eye. I thought it was strange, but it was the moonlight coming in through one of the gaps in the wall. A must have been dragging us there on purpose. Why didn't I notice it? Thinking back on it now, it's strange. I heard your eyes get used to the dark, but I was drowning in fear. It really was pitch black. Anyway, seeing that light saved me, and I was thankful to A. I couldn't see or hear anything, but I did hear something being dragged, but thanks to that, I was better off than you two, A later told me. What a guy. I saw A holding onto B's arm on his other side in the moonlight. His face was sweating profusely. I couldn't even ask him what he saw or what happened. Unlike the day, nighttime was quiet and all we could hear were crickets in the distance. We stood there motionless for a while, and while it was embarrassing, the three of us holding hands, we then sat down in a circle without letting go. It was the safest position for us to be in. But above all, just being able to see each other in the smallest slither of light was another level. We sat like that for a while, and then what we all expected came to pass. A needed to pee. It was something we couldn't biologically avoid. He took the bag the monk gave him out of his pocket and moved a short distance away from us. The sound of his urinating reverberated throughout the silence. That foolish sound lightened our spirits somewhat, and B and I grinned at each other. Then, B-kun. In an instant, our bodies became strained. And then we heard it again. It was on the other side of the door. B-kun. We knew the owner of that voice immediately. We heard it that very morning. It was Misaki. B-kun, I made you some rice balls. The voice spoke to us as though asking us how we were. The intonation was flat and the tone like a machine. B gripped my hand even tighter. B-kun. After a short silence, it was like the floodgates were opened. B-kun, I made you some rice balls. Welcome! I made you some rice balls. B-kun, welcome! I made you some rice balls. The voice repeated the same words over and over. It wasn't normal. I was scared. It was Misaki's voice, but I was terrified. The monk said no one would come near the Ondo. Not to mention that cold manner of speaking. The thing on the other side of that door most definitely was not Misaki. Before I knew it, A was back beside us and grabbed both our arms. He squeezed hard, so he must have heard the voice as well. The three of us sat there, frozen, staring at the door. The voice continued. Welcome! B-kun! I made you some rice balls. Hey, wait a minute. The thing on the other side of the door wanted to get inside. I immediately thought about what to do if the door opened. We gotta run away as fast as we can. The monk said he was in the main building, so we can run there. Wait, where's the main building? All I could think about was running. Then the thing started banging on the door, like it was slamming against it with its body. The cold voice continued. In the same manner, it started moving slowly to the left. It stopped at regular intervals, and then followed the walls to the left again. What's it doing? Then I realized something. There were holes in the wall we were sitting by. The thing was getting closer. What if it can see in through the gaps? What if We can see it from in here. I couldn't sit there any longer. I pulled the other two with me into the middle of the room. We moved slowly, but surely. I even tried to tell my beating heart to stop making sounds. I didn't want that thing to know we were there. No, it already knew we were. My teeth started to chatter, and I bit down hard on my finger to stop them. Then, from one of the gaps in the wall, I saw it. I saw its face in the moonlight. The thing that, until that point, I had only heard. Its face was pitch black, and its long and narrow white eyes seemed to be floating in nothingness. And the sound I thought was it ramming its body against the wall, I soon came to realize it was using its head instead. Its face disappeared from the gap for a second. It was bending backwards. Then it threw its face into the wall with incredible force. As it hit the wall, its eyes seemed to pop out. I couldn't look away. But it wasn't paralysis because the rest of my body was trembling. It was just something I'd never seen before, so I couldn't tear my eyes off it. It continued talking as it smashed its head against the wall, entirely unlike a real human being. But in the end, it didn't appear to see us, and after hitting its head against the gap for a while, it started to move to the left again. The image of it hitting its head synced up with the sound I could still hear in my mind, and I could clearly visualize what was happening outside. Honestly, I don't know how long it was out there. I wasn't able to distinguish reality from the after image in my mind. I later heard that after that thing disappeared and silence returned, the three of us were quiet the whole time. Because A was vigilant. Because B was so scared he couldn't move. Because the image of that thing was playing over and over in my mind. When A grabbed my arm to take me back to the light, my body was so stiff that, for a moment, I thought I was dead. I honestly thought it was rigor mortis. B was grinding his teeth so hard in fear that his gums had started to bleed. A was, once again, the only one who didn't see it. When the thing left, it apparently let out a strange call, like that of a crow. That was the only thing A heard. But we couldn't relax for fear that the thing might return again. We couldn't break the tension that had overtaken our bodies. We hung our heads and couldn't look at each other. Even when B wet himself, neither A nor I thought anything of it. That was the first time I realized how long a night can be. Seeing their haggard faces, showing my haggard face, and of course, seeing that thing that wasn't human. I remembered it all so clearly, and even now, I can't forget it. Light shone through the gaps in the walls, and even though we knew it was morning, we couldn't look up. We just sat there. The sparrows chirped, and we could hear the farmers going about their work in the distance. It all pierced our hearts. Could we really live our lives once we got out of there? I wondered. Sunlight shone in, and we heard footsteps. We readied ourselves. The footsteps approached, went around the back of the ondo, and stopped by the entrance. I held my breath. The door rattled, and then it opened. The monk was standing there. When he found us, he looked like he was about to cry. "You boys did well." I'll never forget the look in his eyes at that moment. He was so happy. I tried to stand up and fell back over. Despite my age, I bawled like a baby. Regardless of our sweat and the urine everywhere, the monk entered the building and hugged each of us. His robes gave off a nostalgic smell of incense, and from the bottom of my heart, I felt we were alive. I cried like a child once more. I was unable to stand even after a short period of time had passed, so the monk went and called some men. The two of them grabbed me by the shoulders and carried me back to the house. We passed by the large temple we saw on the way in, and as we did, the three of us heard a scream in the distance. It was low, and then suddenly it became a high-pitched scream. "That thing just before, that was the landlady's voice, wasn't it?" A whispered to me once we reached the front door. No way, I thought. But then it really did sound like her as well. But I was so tired that I couldn't really think about it. I just wanted to go inside, but that girl met us at the entrance with an unpleasant look on her face and said, "Hurry up and take a bath." Oh well, after all, we did stink to the high heavens. The three of us bathed together. We were scared after all, and I didn't want to be alone all of a sudden. We were guided to the tatami room once we got out, and 3 futons were laid out inside. "Sleep," they said. We knew the room was safe, and I was beyond tired. My body moved before my brain, and I buried my face in the pillow. I slept like a log. As I was falling asleep, I remembered something. We better call those guys when we wake up and let them know that we're going home. The other 2 were ready to enjoy their holiday and had no idea of what we'd just been through, nor that their plans were about to be ruined. On that note, I spoke to B on our way out of the Ondo. "Can you see it anymore?" He answered confidently, "Nope, it's gone. Thanks." I decided at that moment not to mention B wetting himself again. We were saved, and that was enough. When we later woke up, we decided to ask the monk to tell us the truth. It was there we learnt how scary people can truly be, and the strange truth behind the power of faith. What B saw, what I saw, what A heard. Once we learnt about all of that, we were once again determined to get as far away from there as possible. After we slept like the dead, the monk's voice woke us up. "Everyone, are you awake?" A always had trouble waking up in the morning, so we hit him as usual, and then the 3 of us sat on our knees in front of him. "You boys really did your best yesterday, and we managed to exercise the spirit." He smiled kindly at us. We didn't know what to say in response to that, so we just smiled in return. There were so many things we wanted to ask, but we couldn't speak. "I need to tell you boys everything," the monk continued, as though reading our minds. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said, and stood up. We left the house and made our way towards the temple. B started looking around nervously as we climbed the stairs. I remembered that thing I saw the night before and did the same. "It should be okay now," the monk said, noticing us. "How is it?" "Yeah, I can't see anything," B said. "Me either," I replied. At that, the monk smiled. We arrived at a large building that he called the main temple building. We followed him around the side and entered a room that was nearly exactly the same as the one that we just came from. The monk told us to wait a moment and then left. B started fidgeting nervously. A short while later, the monk returned, holding a small wooden box, and he sat facing us. "I will show you how this all began," he said, and opened the box. The 3 of us leaned forward to peek inside. There was a small black object, like a dried out mushroom, that was wrapped up in cotton. "What's that?" we asked. It was hard to tell just by looking at it, but it felt like I'd seen it somewhere before. Then I suddenly remembered. When I was a kid, my mother had a wooden box in her chest of drawers just like that one. She happily showed me what was inside it. There was a small black object wrapped in cotton, and I didn't know what it was, so I asked her. "This is what they call an umbilical cord. It's proof of our connection," she said. "Why do you keep such a thing?" I thought as a child. The thing in front of me at that moment looked just like that. "What is it?" A asked. "It's an umbilical cord," the monk answered. So it didn't just look like one. It was one. "I've never seen one before," A said. "I have," B replied. "Me too." "Your parents no doubt showed you. There are a lot of people who keep and preserve them," the monk said. This cord was also carefully preserved. We sat there quietly and listened to his story. "Inside your mother's womb, you are connected to her via this cord. There are many mothers nowadays who keep it in commemoration of the birth and the bond that mother and child share. There are many legends regarding the umbilical cord, and there are many people who have believed in those since long ago." "Legends?" B asked. "That's right. In the past, people held those legends very dear to their hearts, although these days, people treat them as mere superstitions." Having explained that, the monk went on to tell us about the umbilical cord legends. In general, the cord signified protecting one's child, although there were several interpretations. If you boil the umbilical cord and make them drink it, a child on the verge of death from illness can be saved. If your child holds their umbilical cord, they will be protected from danger. There were many beliefs, but what they all had in common was a mother's desire to protect her child. Upon hearing that, all we could do was comment stupidly with, "Oh." The monk took a breath before continuing. "Can I tell you some folklore from this area? I'd like you to hear it because it has something to do with this very incident." We all nodded. The following is his story. It was pretty long and I don't remember all of it clearly, so there may be some parts missing. Fishing came with many dangers, and I can only imagine the warrior mother must have felt as she waited for her child to return. It surely must have been very difficult. Before she knew it, this mother gave her child their umbilical cord for protection. This would protect her child, and if her child ever went missing, would bring them back to her. "They would come back?" I said before I could stop myself. "That's right. Children are small, and so they were often swept away by the waves. For these children who disappeared, they were treated as dead after a few days. But for the mothers who suddenly lost their child, they were unable to accept this as reality, and they waited endlessly for their child to return. And so, at some point, mothers started to give their children their umbilical cord. Because this connected you to me inside my womb, so it will return you to me in life as well. The cord came to be treated as a lifeline." I thought he was joking. That which acted as an amulet to protect against the dangers of the ocean also held meaning as a lifeline when danger occurred. Just what were mothers thinking when they sent their children out? "But there was never a single case where a missing child who had their umbilical cords on them at the time actually returned," the monk continued. "But then one day, a joyous mother appeared, claiming that her missing child had returned. Those around her could not believe her and instead felt pity for her. She had finally gone mad. For that woman's child had gone missing 3 years earlier." "Maybe they just got swept away somewhere and was safe there instead," B suggested. "That's right. There were people who thought that might be the case as well, and they asked the mother to show the child to them." "And then?" "The mother said to them, 'Please wait, and I will show you shortly.'" What did that mean? Was she going to go back so she could fetch the child first? For some reason I couldn't understand. I got goosebumps. Of course, the villagers doubted her upon hearing that, but having seen the mother so depressed since her child disappeared, they could say nothing against her and quietly withdrew. Then, the next day, another mother appeared with the same happy news. She also said that she was unable to reveal her child just yet, and the villagers were thrown into a state of confusion. The first mother was a widow, so there was no way to confirm her story, but the second mother's husband was still alive. The villagers begged of him to confirm the truth. Then he said to them, "I know nothing of such a thing." In contrast to the mother's joy, the father claimed to know nothing. Yet when the villagers continued to press him, he told them to stay out of other people's business. Of course, I wouldn't want people sticking their nose into my business either. Then, a few days later, one of the villagers said that they saw the first mother walking along the beach with her child the night before. It was dark, so they couldn't see well, but she was holding hands with a child and talking. She seemed terribly happy. Hearing that, the villagers felt that they should apologize and they should celebrate the return of the child, and so they decided to go visit the mother. When they arrived at her house, the mother greeted them with a large smile. They explained why they were there and lowered their heads. "Don't worry about it," she said. "My child has come back, and that is all that matters." She grabbed the hand of her child, hiding behind the door, and pulled them out for the villagers to see. At that moment, their blood ran cold. The child's skin was purple, and their body horribly bloated. From their swollen eyelids, two thin white eyes peeked out, and the barely visible pupils rolled in different directions. Foam spurted from the child's mouth, and the voice that came out was strange and off-putting. It was like that of a crow cawing. The villagers watched the mother smile gently at her child's strange voice and pat the child's head, even as hair continued to fall off, and, unable to take it anymore, they ran off in fear. That night they gathered at the village chief's house. Not a single person was able to withstand the terror of what they saw, and the chief knew that he was unable to deal with such a problem. So, everyone went to visit the chief priest of the nearby temple. That chief priest was one of my ancestors. The priest listened to their story and, realizing the seriousness of it, went to visit the mother right away. When he looked at the child by her side, he dragged the mother to the temple with him. The child followed, screaming the entire way. When they reached the temple, he took the mother to a strongly guarded room and listened to her story. But perhaps the anxiety of being parted from her child made it difficult for her to explain herself well. She threatened the priest, raging and screaming for her child back. "Then what happened?" A asked. A mother thinking of her child is strong beyond words. The priest used all of his strength to pin her down, but she threw him off and fled the temple. The monk looked sad as he said it. After that, he returned to the mother's house with some subordinates and a few other villagers, but the mother and child were gone. Inside the house, they found talismans of an unknown origin pasted here and there, and in the corner, they discovered a pile of rotten food, giving off a powerful stench. It instantly reminded me of the second floor of the inn. Everyone there thought the same thing. The mother was so sad at the loss of her child that she must have performed some type of ritual to get them back. While it was difficult to believe, that thing was a product of that ritual, and understanding that, the villagers searched the entire village looking for her whereabouts. The priest went to visit the second mother's home with more followers, but they were too late. The father was terrified of the mother talking to the mysterious figure and calling it by their child's name. The priest approached the figure while chanting the sutras, but the mother glared at him, screaming and threatening him to protect her child. The story didn't sound real, and yet, for some reason, I was sweating anyway. The villagers were so scared that they couldn't take a single step closer. But the priest and his followers didn't hesitate. They approached the mother and the thing, finally subduing her and dragging her back to the temple. They chanted prayers to the thing following them while the mother struggled, and they sprinkled salt as they proceeded. When they reached the temple, the priest took the mother to the Ondo, where he then tied her up and put her inside. No way! A felt bad for the woman. There was nothing else they could do. Separating the mother from her child was their first priority. If they didn't do that, they would be unable to help her. It wasn't like the monk before us had anything to do with it, but A still turned away from him. After a brief silence, the monk continued. Measures were taken to prevent the mother from killing herself, but I don't know the exact details. After that, they surrounded the Ondo with sacred rope, and the priest and his followers sat in a circle around it to begin praying. They could hear the mother screaming inside, but they chanted even louder so the child wouldn't hear her. Finally, the child appeared before them. It circled the Ondo, looking for its mother. It was searching for a way in, but perhaps thanks to the prayers of the priest and his followers, it was unable, and so they continued desperately. The monk stopped to catch his breath. Then what happened? B asked, his voice trembling. It became more difficult for the thing to walk as it circled the Ondo, and then it started to crawl instead. Its joints started to bend, and it moved around like a spider. It was as though it was regressing from its human form. Then the thing moaned, and its limbs disappeared, and all that was left was the shape of a caterpillar rolling around. As the night went on, it shrank, and all that was left at the end was an umbilical cord. I was lost in the monk's words. It was like he was telling our own tale in the form of a folk story. Then A asked him something. So, that umbilical cord you have there? The monk answered quietly. We found it on a rock behind the Ondo this morning. Are you for real? B muttered, dumbfounded. Why? Why us? I asked. I don't know why. The monks of this temple have kept notes for generations, but we can't find any cases of this phenomenon happening outside of mothers. Above all, the ritual the mothers undertake is still wrapped in mystery. They didn't ask the mother about it, B said. It wasn't that they didn't ask, but that they couldn't ask. The monk ignored our faces and continued with his story. When the priest opened the Ondo to look inside, the exhausted mother was lying limp. She had spent her entire night screaming for her child. They removed the mother and gave her medical treatment, but when she opened her eyes, all sign of consciousness was gone. Perhaps it was the loss of her child again, or perhaps because of the ominous thing itself. They couldn't be sure as to why. The villagers searched for the other mother all night long, and the next morning, when he was worn out from praying, the chief priest received news that they had found her. Her corpse was washed up on the beach. Her body had been torn apart and eaten by something, and yet her face looked happy, even in death. Nobody knew what happened, but the priest wrote in his diary, "Consumed by her own child. In the end, the mother smiled completely." The story was unbelievable, but we took his words in one by one. The villagers discussed what to do with the mother's house and agreed to tear it down, and inside they discovered a memo she wrote. The monk then explained to us the contents of that memo. It was a growth record of her child, starting from the day of the ritual. I don't know exactly how it was written, but I remember the details, so I'll write them here. They might be a little difficult to understand. Something month, something day. Started building the hall. Something month, something day. No change. Something month, something day. Maru Maru, child's name, came back. Something month, something day. Seems to have difficulty moving. Something month, something day. Growing legs and arms. Something month, something day. is now slithering. Something month, something day, moving around on hands and feet. Something month, something day, is talking. Something month, something day, is standing. This growth record was supposedly full of the mother's emotions towards her child. Oh, and the other mother supposedly built a hole in the roof of her house. The husband had no idea it was there. I can't say that I understand everything, but comparing the mother's records with the notes the chief priest took, doesn't it seem like that thing's progression then reversed? It did seem that way. Then the monk continued. Although rare, there are a few mentions in the chief priest's notes after this, but there is nothing recorded about how the mothers discovered these rituals, nor how they took place. What that means is that no mother was ever in a position afterwards to be able to explain herself. The monk then said he regretted that they were unable to discover these things sooner. Your case is the first we've ever seen like it, so I'm a little perplexed by it. Why were you able to see it, when you are not its mother? Only the mother knows about her child's growth, and those who live with her shouldn't be able to confirm such things. His story sounded ridiculous, to be honest. Then B timidly asked him a question, trying to get to the core of the story. When you say mother, do you mean the landlady? The monk was silent for a moment before answering. That's correct. Makiko-san wasn't born in this area. She came here when she married her husband. She gave birth to a son, and they were an extremely close family. I could guess what happened after that. The landlady's son went missing in the ocean several years earlier. A large-scale search was held, but in the end, they couldn't find him. In her sorrow, the landlady sought comfort from her surroundings, and slowly she regained her vigor. The inn flourished, and as everyone was starting to forget about the accident, suddenly the second floor of the inn became off-limits. People found it strange, but not strange enough to want to stick their noses in, so they soon forgot about it. And then all this happened. It was unclear how the landlady learnt of the ritual, but she turned the second floor into the hall necessary for the ritual and held it there. Then it attached itself to us, and the monk explained that it was the first time he'd heard of something like this happening. For some reason, the child attached itself to us, total strangers, rather than to its own mother. One possibility was that the landlady didn't have her son's umbilical cord. The villagers of old passed it down as a custom, but the landlady didn't know about that. Her husband supposedly testified to this. Then, strangely, even though the second floor was closed off, she hired 3 people for part-time work. Her husband was against the idea at first, but she apparently cried and managed to convince him because, I miss my son. If there are boys here the same age, then I think he'll come back. The monk theorized that the landlady knew from the beginning that her son would attach himself to us, treating us as parents. Then, after telling us all of that, the monk spoke again. I'm terribly sorry I had to leave you in the Ondo, but I had to save both Makiko-san and you boys. While you boys were here, I went to bind Makiko-san to the hall and read out prayers like my ancestors did. I didn't know which way the thing might go, to you boys in the Ondo, or to the hall and its mother. In other words, we were the ones possessed, but in every case before us, the mother was the one in danger, so the monk suspected that might also apply to the landlady. I personally didn't feel like the monk needed to apologize. I mean, we owed him our lives. I looked at B. His shoulders were shaking and he was glaring at the monk. No, I refuse to accept it. Does she just think that she can play with people's lives like that if it means getting her son back? The monk was silent. Spit it out already. Why did this happen to us? If you can't do that, then we'll go and ask her ourselves. Her husband knows as well, right? So why didn't he say anything either? He didn't know, the monk replied. Don't lie to me. He spoke to us like he knew of it. This story has existed in this area for a long time. He likely knows of it just as folklore. It didn't appear that the monk was lying, but B was too worked up. Quit screwing around. Take us to her. Take us to her now. We held B back, but he was desperate. The monk didn't falter, and he listened to B's protests calmly. When I decided to tell you this story, I told myself that I would show you everything. I will take you to see Makiko-san, he said, and then stood up. We followed the monk out. We thought she might be in the main building, but we passed through a hall to another place outside. As we got closer, we could hear screams and the sounds of chanting. Something was banging in unison with the voices. It was rather loud. We stood in front of the door. The noise was right there on the other side. My heart trembled at what might be happening there. The monk opened the door, and the landlady was in the middle of the room, surrounded by several monks. None of us could say a word. The landlady was right there, but she was flopping around like a shrimp. I can't explain it very well. She was lying on the tatami mats, her body bending and warping and jumping about. It was the first time I'd ever seen someone move like that. Every now and then she screamed in pain. I was so scared that I couldn't look at her face. Although it was somewhat different, it was similar to the fear I felt the previous night. She's been like this since this morning, the monk told us as we stood there, dumbfounded. I can't be here anymore, A said, unable to take it, and left. Just listening to it was painful. She was like an entirely different person to the landlady we spoke to just the day before. When we got away from the room, we asked the monk if he had successfully exorcised us. Yes, I think we successfully cleansed you of the spirit that took you for its parents. You are here, and we have the umbilical cord. However, I see. What I saw wasn't just one spirit, B said suddenly. I didn't know what he was saying at first, but then it hit me. B said he saw several shadows on the stairs that time. Not just one, the monk repeated, surprised. Yes, B told him, and the monk went quiet. He pondered that for a bit, and then his face lit up like he'd remembered something. Go back to the house, he said. Don't take one step out of that room. I'll send someone to see you shortly. He left us behind and ran back to the room with the landlady. We stood there for a bit in silence, and then we saw several monks carrying a large object wrapped in cotton out of the room. It was moving and convulsing. It had to be the landlady, we all thought. We watched them carry her to the ondo in silence, and then looked at each other. We got scared and ran back to the house. After that, nothing of note happened. A monk came to see us and told us to spend the night. He stayed with us, and the four of us awkwardly waited the night out until morning. We woke up early the next morning and we were watching the news on TV when the monk came back. We lined up in front of him to listen to his story. He told us his purification of us was completely finished. The thing that attached itself to us was just a single one, as said the day before, and it had completely degenerated and was now gone. Hearing that, we were relieved, but he wasn't done yet. He was unable to save the landlady. It was difficult to tell if he was sad or angry, but his expression changed as he said it. We asked if she was dead, but he said that wasn't it. I remembered her flopping about the day before. Will she be like that forever? I nervously asked the monk, and he said that there was something else behind it, not the evil spirit. He wouldn't tell us the details, but the ritual the landlady performed was a false one, passed down in that area called the ritual to call your child home. Somehow, the landlady had heard it from somewhere, and missing her son, she decided to carry it out. However, that meant it needed the umbilical cord. The monk supposed that the landlady attempted the ritual through trial and error, and somehow eventually got through based on her convictions. And then, as a result, she called back something entirely different. There were several things in the hall she created, and nobody knew if her son was one of them. The results of that ritual were extremely cruel, but even knowing so, mothers continued to enter that forbidden domain because of the sadness in losing a child. We could only guess, but for these mothers with a giant hole in their heart, it was something they could always rely on. B persisted in asking the monk what would happen to the landlady, but he told him he didn't know. The situation was wrapped in mystery. When he was finished speaking, the landlady's husband entered the room. Honestly, I was startled. His face was tired and worn out. He stood in front of us and tearfully apologized. He was crying so much we couldn't make out what he was saying, but seeing him like that, there was nothing we could say. We didn't know whether he was crying because of what he did to us or because of what happened to his wife. Even now, I still don't know. Afterwards, we checked with the monk over and over that things were really okay now. Would anything strange happen to us after? The monk appeared troubled, but he said everything would be fine. After that, we called a taxi so we could go home, and the middle-aged man who carried us back to the house the day before told us that he would come with us to the station. He was a chatty guy, and despite everything that had happened to us, he talked to us like he didn't have a care in the world. But even so, he then said to us, doesn't a child eating their mother sound just like a spider? We were disgusted and remained silent, but he kept going. Don't you kids try what you heard about here. It'll be your own fault then. He smiled. I didn't know if he was saying that to lighten the mood or if he was just an idiot. But one thing was for sure. The monk had hidden the truth from us. It wasn't just how to do the ritual that was passed down, but the results as well. There was no way that the middle-aged man knew what happened, but the monk didn't. Thinking about it, I was shocked that he would hide such an important thing from us after all we'd been through. I wanted to believe in him, but I was angry as well. When we got to the station, the old guy offered to pay for the taxi, but we refused. We just wanted to get away from there as soon as possible. When the monk told us we'd be okay, that felt like a lie as well. But we didn't have the courage to go back to the temple, and we sat quietly on the train as we went home. After we got back, things went back to normal. Well, it's because nothing happened that I'm able to write this here today. I never want to go back there again. Whenever the three of us were talking together, that topic always came up at least once. It became a source of trauma for us. B was never able to look at spiders again after that either, because all he could see was the growth process of that thing. I'm a regular full-time worker now, although I've developed a bit of a fear of the dark. The saying, danger past and God forgotten, probably isn't too far off the mark, huh? And we've really reached the end. But let me tell you about our other two friends first. When they saw the three of us, they thankfully believed us when we told them what happened. But they were also filled with curiosity, so they went and called the inn after. Terrible, right? Apparently, some normal old lady answered. And they kept telling us to check on the landlady. They say they can hear crows cawing strangely behind us. There's no way. Whether she's safe or not, I'm not brave enough to find out what happened after all that. To end this week's episode, a massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier member, Jojo. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Bunkai, Baffling Japanese Internet Mysteries Volume 2, available on Amazon right now, and our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.